All right. So welcome. All right. Honey, no. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Welcome. I am Marissa Beyer, Chair of Curriculum Advisory, and we are going to go ahead and get started with the reading and approval of our agenda from February 22nd. So let me go ahead and pull that up. Or sorry, go ahead and pull it up. It is up right now. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. Here we go. Oh, I just heard a beep here. Here we go. All right. All those approve. We'll just need a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Second motion. Okay, so we got one. Sit in the chat. Okay. Isabel Barroso, second. Okay, so reading and approval of the minutes from our January 25th agenda, which is right up here. All right, so I'm gonna just scroll through this, not going too fast. Let me know if it's too much. Okay, we're good. Pretty much on this page. We've got our board member report now. Okay, let me pull up our agenda. All right. Okay, so all of those approve. We just need a motion to approve our minutes from January 25th, which was this one. And I am watching the chat too. Okay, so we've got a motion to approve the minutes from 125. That also came from Ms. Barroso. Second motion to approve. Okay, and Dr. Wilkerson also motion to approve the second motion. Okie doke. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the review of our mission statement and purpose of the committee. So our mission statement, I have it up here on the shared screen. Mission statement: to advise the school board by recommending approaches to obtaining improved student achievement for all students through a coherent, rigorous academic course of study that provides the tools necessary to succeed in today's society. Emphasis will be placed on the dynamic development of a K-12 curriculum within a safe environment, leading to both career and technical majors, methods of instruction used to implement it, and the assessments of its effectiveness, together with a complementary professional development program to support it. Okay. All right, and then we'll move to public comment. I don't know, is there anyone who is from here that is not part of the committee? Any public, I don't know if there is. I don't think so. Okay, I don't think so. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move to our board member report, which is presented by Mary Fisher. I think you are mute.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, great. So the news that I have this week is that we are reorganizing our student advisory committee. We have not met most of last in about a year. And recently, for those of you who don't know, the Student Advisory Committee was created in 2014 to provide students the opportunity to provide input and participate in the continuous improvement of the district, and also to voice the needs of students. Each middle and high school is invited to have 2 members, 1 representative and 1 alternate. The Student Advisory Board holds monthly meetings during the school year. Today actually is the deadline for students interested to apply. And the first meeting will be on March the 10th at 6 o'clock, and the meetings will be held by Zoom for the rest of this school year. Then we're going to re-invite the same students to join us again for the 21-22 school year to provide some continuity and to give those kids who have voiced an interest in coming back and having an opportunity to have more to say. And so what prompted this was recently NBC has had a special on kids under pressure. And they interviewed students from all over the country, and they were giving information regarding how they were impacted by the pandemic and other situations in the country, the division, the violence, etc. Then Mrs. Morgan, my colleague on the board, found an article from 2019 in the New York Times. And it's what students say about how to improve schools. So we are going to reintroduce our kids to one another. And then Mr. Mangan will come in and ask for their input in code of conduct. Now, historically, the Student Advisory Committee over the last 5 years at least has been instrumental in making changes and updates to the code of conduct. And they really have done a very good job. So that will be on the agenda, along with a review of the New York Times article and comments from the students, and then a plan how to move forward based on their needs and their comments. Now, our school counseling and mental health services is keenly aware of the situations that we have. I actually spoke to an elementary school counselor the other day, an elementary school counselor, and she was telling me that she had 4 suicide threats and 1 suicide attempt in her student body. That really gives me cause for concern and pause. So we really need to take a look at what is going on with our kids when they're not traditionally in school. I mean, I think that's had a big impact. So the recently deployed community family response teams, and there's 1 in each zone, has been continuing to receive new referrals for kids and families impacted by COVID-19 and in need of mental health and other supports. More than 70 school mental health professionals have been trained to facilitate cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools. Schools are offering this to kids in need of group counseling to reduce anxiety and depression. Elementary school mental health professionals are in the process of completing the training, and they will be starting facilitation of their groups in the next few weeks. We continue to have a partnership with Lee Health, Healthy Lee, and Kids Minds Matter. 19 families within the school system are currently receiving the supports of a mental health navigator who are provided to us by Lee Health. And Kids Minds Matter is holding a free virtual informational event to provide information about community resources on Thursday, March 18th from 7 to 8 p.m. And I'll send you the link for that. So we want to take a look at our kids. We want to make sure that as we continue to test them and track them, that we are also developing them and meeting their needs so that they are in fact ready to learn, because we want them to be academically successful. So Prevention Services has a student-created vaping prevention video. It's a PSA, and they ran it in the AMC movie theaters and another digital streaming platform from December 2020 through January 2021. The data arrived this week. These PSAs were delivered digitally 180,000 times with 127,434 audience members watching the PSA in its entirety. Furthermore, over 100 viewers sought resources by clicking the link. Now, I guess you guys are aware that the state has passed some rules for us to teach mental health, substance abuse prevention, and child trafficking. I continue to advocate for comprehensive health education because all of that is in the curriculum that the state of Florida has had for 30 years, and it's in the statute that we should teach health. I understand that it's an unfunded mandate, but that isn't quite the case right now since there are grants available and since funding continues to come forward for those particular rules. So I've been watching pending legislation that impacts education, and I'm just going to mention a few. We have had numerous children Baker acted from school, and there's a House Bill 590 is a bill that requires public and charter schools to contact parents of minor students before the student is removed from school. And it provides also that the school will generate an MOU with the local mobile crisis response team and mandate that school and law enforcement personnel contact the crisis response team and the parent before initiating a Baker Act. Let's see what else is important here. Okay, so House Bill 519 and Senate Bill 1094, required health education, provides additional requirements for health education, revises grades when students receive certain health education information. And it was passed the first committee. It was referred to the Secondary Education, Career Development, Early Childhood Learning, and Elementary Education subcommittees. So that looks like it has some movement. Okay, and the others are pretty much related to health education in specificity regarding child trafficking and also mental health assistance allocations. So I wanted to say that I'm looking forward to the best standards report, and I'm going to have to watch that later because I have a family situation that I need to attend to, so I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole entire meeting. But I want to appreciate our academic staff for the work that they continue to do and the information that they continue to provide to the board so that we can share it with the community, and for their support with all of the curriculum development that needs to take place. And any questions? None. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next month.
Alrighty. We'll go ahead and move on to our ELA best standards and plan for implementation, which is presented by Dr. Quisenberry, Lori Houchin, and Candice Alivato.
And Marissa, I'm going to go ahead and take over driving at this point in time, if that's okay.
That's fine. I figured. I was like, I'm pretty sure they're the ones that will do the actual presentation. There we go. Cool.
All yours, Lori.
Okay. Can you, I think, move to the third slide? Okay, so we gave you an update on the textbook adoption, and you were able to give us a recommendation. And so now our decisions are regarding purchasing and when to purchase. And so we wanted to give you a little background on the standards. Marissa and April both served on the committee, so they've received a much more thorough view of the standards versus old standards versus new standards. I'm just going to give you a very condensed version so that you can kind of understand some of the challenges that we face, and then also what opportunities are available to us. So on January 31st, 2019, Governor DeSantis issued an order asking that we eliminate the current standards, or begin to work eliminating the current standards, and that we have our own Florida standards, which means that our standards will look very different from other states, which has implications with publishers, which means that publishers also have to tailor the materials specific to Florida. And so they can't market those same materials to other states. So it's quite a challenge for publishers, and it will be a challenge for our educators as well. So the kindergarten through second grade best standards, we begin teaching those next year, next school year. And then the following year in 2022 and 23, for English language arts, we begin grades 3 through 12. And then we don't get tested on the new standards until that year. So although we will possibly adopt new materials for next year, our students and teachers are held accountable to the current standards until 2022-23. So just to make that clear. Okay, Candice. So this was the timeline, and you can see to the top left, it says most aggressive. So that was a point of pride for the state, is that they were moving pretty quickly in the development of the new standards. And so this is their timeline and their plan. You've seen this before when we did the textbook adoption, but you can see that for elementary, math is coming right on the heels of ELA for when they will be adopting, and that will play a part in some of the decisions that we're going to ask you to weigh in tonight. So just to let you know, so we went through textbook adoption for ELA this year, and we go for textbook adoption for math next year, even though grades 3 through 12 will not be implementing the new standards until 2022-23. Just try to keep all that straight in your head. So it's kind of confusing, but I'm going to clear it up for you, is that the state categorizes the ELA standards in 4 strands. So foundations were always in the elementary standards, but they also included foundational standards now in secondary, because they acknowledge that some students are very far behind in reading and are still needing some foundational skills. So those are in our standards for the first time ever. Reading, is divided into reading prose and poetry, reading informational text, and reading across genres. And it'll look very similar they'll have some literary text, some non-literary text to decipher, but they do have specific text that they requested that the publishers put in their materials. And I think it was 30% of the list. So publishers may pick and choose from a civics list and from a literature list. And then communication has 5 standards. So they're doing that through writing, orally, conventions, research, and creating and collaborating. And then vocab is the final strand. And it's pretty much the same as it has been for a few years. Candace, next slide. So although there are 4 categories, there are 5 tested categories, writing being the 5th reporting category. So reading prose and poetry, reading informational text, and reading across genres, vocabulary, writing, and then they'll have the language and editing, which was assessed separately and in writing, and our current standards will be assessed only on the writing portion in the new standards. So the first one, reading prose and poetry, contains literary elements, theme, perspective, point of view, and poetry. And then this next slide that Candace is going to show you has the breakdown from what's similar and what's different and what are the instructional implications. So in the new standards on literary elements with the number 1-1, that standard is associated with 2 of our current standards. So this is the correlation. So as far as instructional implications, it's very similar to how we're currently teaching it, except that the rigor increases and analysis now begins in 5th grade for the new standards. So you'll see this as a pattern where either sometimes the skill skips an earlier grade level, or sometimes that the rigor on Bloom's taxonomy webs, whichever one you want to use, happens faster at the elementary level than it did at the secondary level. So theme is similar, very much the same, but it begins in the new standards at 1st grade as they start introducing theme. And it also asks them to include identifying details. So there's slight difference there. And BEST uses one text and our current ones go across text. So that was the difference there. And perspective and point of view, it was very similar to our current standard 2.6, but the difficulty at the high school level far surpasses what our current standards require of our students and our teachers. And again, they're sticking with kind of a single text. And then there was this use of multiple narrators, which is very hard to find text that has multiple narrators. So that would be challenging for our publishers. Poetry, you can see I crossed out over on the 2.4, all of that because none of that comes into play with the new standards. So this standard is basically in the new one's going to be figurative meanings and looking at word choices and how they shape meaning and tone. In laughs, poetry was never a standalone. Laughs is our current standards that we're teaching right now. We've never had poetry as a standalone standard before. And the figurative language and the impact on meaning is only a portion of how we teach it now. And it's a big portion of how it is in BEST. So you can see that that'll be a challenge for teachers because all of those other things that are crossed out, you have to continue to teach because the students will be assessed on that until 22, 23. So this one is challenging. And then reading informational text, these are the 4 elements that fall into the new BEST standards. And Candace, if you'll go to the next slide. I just did a similar crosswalk so you can see that the first one is pretty much the same standard, just a different number. But 3rd grade is an adjustment because they moved to looking at text structures, which is earlier than they're typically doing that now. I believe that starts in 5th grade, so that's a jump in grade levels. And then identifying and analyzing structures and similar texts, that's kind of the same as it has been. For central idea, that standard is pretty much the same all the way across, except when you get to grades 10 and 11, they're looking at specific text types. So they can't use just any piece of text, like it tells them exactly which text types that they will be measuring that standard against. And author's purpose, it was a cross match, except for they took out point of view. So right now, our standard is assessing point of view or purpose. And this standard, they're only looking at the purpose. So that was different. And another difference is that perspective is only used in grades 4 and 5 in the new standards. And then from there, it moves to author's purpose. So perspective only shows up once in the whole K-12 continuum. And then it's a complete jump, and that's very different than our teachers are used to teaching. For argument 2.4, there were 2 standards that closely match, but you'll see that in RI 3.9, which is our current standard, that themes is crossed out. So it's just similar topics. There is a jump in 3rd grade and in 5th grade where they identify reasons, but best moves from the author's opinion to the claim by 3rd grade. And that fell a lot earlier than it does in our current standards. And tracking the development of an argument was something that we introduced in middle school and now has to be introduced in 5th grade to tackle the new best standards. And then in high school, it was specific text. So that was the difference there. Reading across genres, these are the 4 components of the new best standards. And then we did a crosswalk. And you can see that in the first one, 3.1 is the new standard, and we have 2.4 that closely aligns to that, but connotative and technical meanings are now crossed out. This is a really big jump in that it starts in kindergarten and 1st grade with descriptive words to figurative language. So that moves pretty quickly for them. And then by 4th grade, they have to look at how the language contributes to the meaning, which began at 7th grade in our current standards. So we went from 7th grade teaching this skill all the way down to 4th grade. And then in 7th grade, they have to look at illusion, symbolism, and allegory, and we've never had that before. So those are going to be skills that were really kind of implicitly taught that we'll now have to explicitly teach with the new standards. And 3.2, that matches only parts of 1.2, and it was, this standard is broken up for us currently. 1.2 is like determine a central idea, and then the second part of that standard was to summarize. And so they've broken that up to where this is just addressing summarization. Elementary students retell until 3rd grade, and then they move to summarize. It's very similar to laughs. And then objective summary is not used, and that's something that is used a lot in this standard, and that we talk about what's objective, what has bias. So that's not a skill. That skill that kind of drops off. And then 6.12 moves to paraphrasing content, which we only have ever taught in writing. So this is very different for us, the summarization part. Comparative reading, 3.9 is a match and of the current standard, and the comparison of 2 texts begins at 3rd grade, which we didn't introduce that till 4th grade currently with our standards now. So that is a grade level earlier. And again, you'll see at the secondary level where they have to use certain pieces of text. And then rhetoric is a brand new standard. I put 2.6 and 3.9 because we touch on it, but it's a new concept for grades 6 through 8. It's not anything that elementary has to worry about, but in grades 6 through 8, it's something that we have to introduce and teach thoroughly because they'll be assessed on it with the new one. And then the last one is vocabulary. And you'll see a lot crossed out in the first one with morphology. So before they had to know like multiple meaning words and unknown words, and now they're just looking at word parts. So like roots, prefixes, suffixes, how they play into that is going to be a big change than how we've been looking at vocabulary in the past. So context clues, all of those kinds of things are out in the new standards, and just looking at morphology for the new standards. Context and connotation, we had 2 language standards that matched with that. The biggest change there is that denotation and connotation begin at 6th grade, which is a lot earlier than, I believe that was at 8th grade in the past. So, and then that's about it for vocabulary. Those were, the first one was a big change. And then writing is also a big change in one way. They are going to, we've always had narrative writing as a standard, but it's never been assessed. And so now they're going to assess narrative writing with argumentative writing and expository. So what they'll do is 2 years of field testing in grades 4 through 7. And then once the field testing is over, then grades 4 and 7 will only have narrative writing, and all the other grade levels will have argumentation or expository. And they're changing the scoring of that as well. Right now, kids can earn points in 3 domains, and it's still 3 domains, but they change the domains and they can have an increase of 12 points. So that whole rubric will be different for how to score writing than how we're currently scoring writing. So in summary, just to kind of sum it up, is that I would say when I first started teaching English to up till about 10 years ago, we taught English by time periods, right? The Romantic period, and you know, it was just like specific periods, and it was a lot of plot structure, but a lot of the questions that and how they were assessed were really just a level 1 application, meaning that they just had to know like what the climax was. They didn't have to know what perpetuated the climax, right? Even though we went further into that, the demands on the test weren't as hard as they are now. When they switched to Common Core, which then changed to LAFS, which is what we're currently on, the rigor really increased. It started increasing with the old standards. It went up a little bit when they went to FCAT 2.0, and then it went up substantially when we went to the new Florida standards, which is what we're on now. So both the rigor and the text complexity are a much higher level than when I first started teaching. Now it's changing again. You saw, and when we did the comparisons, that the rigor is starting at an even earlier age. So they have increased the rigor, but essentially they're still wanting them to read like a researcher, right? To investigate, to look at how language and words, and why did the author put that there, and what was the reasoning behind it. So it's very hard. It's a very hard adjustment, but they move from just what am I getting out of the text to what was the author's purpose of writing it? So what was the author's influence, that kind of thing. So essentially the assessment is still going to be pretty rigorous. There's not going to be a huge change in that, except for that you see these shifts in grade levels of the skills and the standards. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Quisenberry. Bethany.
Yeah. So what does that mean for how we will implement and how we move forward? So you saw in the beginning of the presentation that the way that the state has pushed out the best standards is implementing ELA for K-2 first. So starting next school year, K-2 will already have to implement their best standards. And then the following year, their math will come on board with everyone else for ELA and for math. So the way that we are planning is a little different, obviously, like everything else, than we would have planned if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic this year. We would have started pushing a lot of this stuff out earlier. But so we're going to start our professional development for our K2 teachers in April. And we'll start giving specific trainings on their standards and how they correlate. And we've already built, like what Lori was just showing, what it was and what it's moving towards. And then at the end of May, we will start training them on their new curriculum. So the new curriculum will already have the best standards in the textbooks, right? So then we'll start training them on that. In June, the teachers will start to have access to, we go to school all the way until I think it's June 17th. And so in June, the teachers will still be in session. We'll be able to push out our first quarter instructional guides with the new curriculum and the new standards. So our department for K-2 for next year will rebuild all of their resources, instructional guides, scope and sequence, their assessments on the best standards. And then over the summer, we'll continue to offer digital professional development directly from the company, directly from Wonders. And then we will also continue to offer best standard training through Zoom or through recordings. We'll record all of our professional development so that teachers can view it over the summer as well. Then in the beginning of the school year, we'll make sure that we offer all of those trainings for our new teachers or for our teachers that move to a different grade level, because you might have a fifth grade teacher this year, but next year they teach first grade. So we have to make sure we have a plan to train those teachers as well. Go ahead, Candace. Then for 3rd to 5th grade, it gets even more complicated, if you can believe that. So for 3rd to 5th grade, next year, they'll still be on the old standards and they will still take their current assessment. They'll still take FSA. However, we will have to begin to introduce the new curriculum and the new standards to them to be able to implement the following school year. So we'll start those trainings with 3rd to 5th earlier. We'll start them in the beginning of the school year. And that way, when they're using the new materials, they can make sure that they are starting to transition to those terms. So you see the example where they currently say central message, but they'll start using the word theme. So those are where the big pieces lie, is in the instructional language of the teachers. So then we'll also begin to change all of our resources for 3rd to 5th so that they'll be ready the following school year. The reason that we are going to go ahead and purchase for 3rd to 5th the new materials is because the following year we purchase for math. And in elementary, they teach everything, right? So it is, it's very frustrating for a teacher to have to learn 2 new materials the same year. And if we didn't purchase for ELA for next school year, the following school year, they would be forced to learn math and ELA new materials at the same time. And so we don't want to do that to them. We would prefer to push out the new materials, make sure that we have a hybrid for them where they're using their current materials and the new materials, and that we're training them on the best standards while still ensuring that we are preparing our students for FSA.
So in 612, one of the things that we wanted to have you weigh in on, and we'll still have our textbook adoption committee weigh in, and others, is that for ELA, not for reading, but for ELA, whether or not we should go ahead and have them juggle 2 sets of standards and 2 sets of curriculum, or should we delay and purchase the curriculum later next school year and then give the PD and be ready to go that following year? So the considerations are that, again, our teachers and students are accountable for the current standards until 2021, 2022. They'll still be assessed and teachers will still be evaluated based on the current standards. Our funds that we use for instructional materials, we can hold those and carry those over because we complied with the state guidelines for textbook adoption. So that is something that we can use the funds. They don't just go away. And then training on the new standards and the alignment to the current standards will be delivered and implemented, and the updates happen on our instructional guides regardless of what we choose to do. So I put down some advantages for purchasing now and advantages for delaying the purchase. So on the left-hand side, you saw, that's kind of why I did the comparison, that the standards are somewhat similar. Sometimes they were very similar and sometimes they're different, but there are grade level jumps with every standard. So there may be some overlap, and teachers, if we purchase now, teachers would have an extra year to learn the new curriculum before they're held accountable for the standards that are aligned to it. If we purchase now, teachers and students would receive new textbooks, and which I know they would be excited about because our current textbooks are about 6 years old now. Media specialists would be able to get them barcoded instead of having to barcode both math and ELA the same year. So that's just one, some consideration because it is taxing. But advantages for delaying the purchase is that although we talked about the overlaps and we talked about the rigor, the concern would be that a teacher could misrepresent a current standard and teach the current standard wrong because they've moved to the new materials that are aligned to the best standards. And we know some grade levels jumped. So our students may not be prepared correctly. Teachers would have to adapt the curriculum because, so remember that the standards have different numbers too. So we've had this happen before when it moved from Common Core to LAFs, is that teachers were teaching, but the numbers weren't matching up, and it was really hard, and we had to keep giving them correlation charts, and we'd have to do that again if we go ahead and purchase. So if we delayed purchase, they wouldn't have that struggle. We can renew our existing materials. We did that this year. It's called a gap year. So they would still have all the online resources and everything. If we decide to delay, we would go ahead and renew those so that they have the current materials, access to the current materials. And then another advantage is that we know that it said an aggressive timeline, and it really was. And so publishers were really rushing to try to understand the standards and to get that out. And we know that they may have to clean some of it up as they learn more about the standards. And so once you delay, the revisions, they may have more up-to-date materials as they make those revisions. So that might be another advantage. Go ahead. Okay, so we're going to give you an opportunity to weigh in, and Candace put in a document in the Google Drive. And so what we thought we would let you guys do is open up the floor. I put all of the advantages for each of those, but I want you to rate it of whether you think it's of low significance, some significance, or high significance, and everybody can just do their own rating and we'll tally it up. And yeah, yes, Dr. Wilkerson, you would talk before you rate. And then we would kind of look at, what your thoughts are for the pros and cons, basically, for 6 through 12 only, because elementary has to go ahead and purchase, of going ahead and adopting now or waiting later. And we wanted you to rate it with students in mind and with teachers in mind, because we don't make this decision. These materials are for students as much as they are for teachers. And so I'm going to get off and give you the opportunity to talk through these. I don't know if Marissa or Dr. Wilkerson, which one of you want to lead this discussion, but let you talk about it. And then based on your rankings, maybe we can come up with what this committee would recommend. And then we would certainly let your voice be heard when we talk with our teacher committee as well. Marissa, if
There
you're
you go.
talking, there you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. I had to press it again for some reason. All right. So it looks like what we're doing is we need to kind of rate what our significance would be in these categories for whether we should go ahead now with adopting materials based on the significance of these advantages in that, or delay based on those significances. So let me go ahead, and I know that it was, I'm not the one sharing the screen, someone else is. Okay. Well, am I sharing the screen? What is
Remember that
Oh, Marissa, I have the activity up right now. That way you guys could see those indicators just in case you had any questions or a clarification based upon the information that both Lori and Bethany shared. If we want to have an open discussion on some of the things you guys heard, questions you have, clarifications, so that way we can get to this point of rating these items to see if the committee can make a recommendation for us at 6:12 to hold on adoption or to go ahead and move forward with adoption. So right now it's just open floor.
And remember that in the chat is the link to the sheet if you want to see it on your own computer.
Talk.
Dr. Wilkerson, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's all important. So I'm going to have a little hard time differentiating and, deciding whether it's high significance or low significance. But I think one of the things that we need to think about is, where is the potential greater to do harm? And what I was seeing when I started to read through some of the advantages in the blue area, and I can't see it all right now, but it sounded to me like there was the potential for folks to make mistakes. And if they make mistakes, does that cause harm to the students in terms of their test scores, which, whether we like it or hate it, is a serious issue for students. So if a teacher were to move forward too quickly, what would be the implications of that for the students in that room? That's what worries me. I think it would be wonderful to have the new textbooks, and there are wonderful advantages there, but does the potential for harm outweigh the potential for good? It's kind of a global decision that I'm trying to grapple with.
So, Dr. Wilkerson, my point of view as a teacher and working in a school, I feel moving forward, especially if you're looking at advantages of adopting new materials now, I'm starting at the bottom of where the orange box is. I think for media specialists, especially at large schools. So if you're looking, and I can only speak to the East Zone schools, but you're speaking to those schools where there's large amounts of books that have to be barcoded. And the media specialists are not all year positions, that I think that would be high significance, so they wouldn't have to barcode math and ELA at the same time. I also feel, and these are just my opinions, having new textbooks would be beneficial, and having them be able to have an extra year to learn the new curriculum before being held accountable would be helpful. My only caveat or holding back would be that I like what Mrs. Houchin said, as far as if the curriculum department could do those correlations for the teachers, because I think that's what you were talking about, Mrs. Wilkerson, is making sure there's no gray area so that it's black and white for the teachers, as far as we're going to go ahead and move forward with purchasing this to make it a smooth transition, so we don't have reading and math the same year, or ELA/math the same year, but also providing them that support, and then their coaches at their individual schools would also be able to help them with the correlation so they wouldn't make those mistakes like what you're talking about. It's not going to be easy, whichever way we adopt, but I think being able to have it now would be much more beneficial than waiting and trying to do math together with the other textbook adoption.
Just so you know, another option to throw out there is we could, if you decide to delay, we could go ahead and do the purchase like April of this year because the money is there, and then they would be barcoded, and we could get all our training done at the end of this school year. So that, you know, just one more thing to weigh in on. It's up to you.
I guess the thing that's I can't see the whole thing on the blue one, but my eye just goes straight to the word misrepresent. That just scares the heck out of me. So if there's a way to minimize the risk of teachers misrepresenting a current standard, which could cause a student to fall below the cut score, that's got to be a very high priority because number one, it's obviously very bad for the students, but it's also puts the district at risk because that's the stuff of which lawsuits are made when students fail. So a serious, serious validity issue. And that scares me. So there've got to be some safeguards in place that just does not happen. So it's very good that you thought of that potential. But if you move forward, you got to make sure that nothing is misrepresented. I don't know if there are any other things that are in there that trigger that.
And one other thing I didn't list, but that we talked about is that right now during COVID, textbooks are everything is online. So that means that teachers would have to, if we started the year like we did this year, teachers would only be using online materials. So there's that as well.
So does that make it easier or harder?
For myself, when it comes to online material, I started the year entirely Home Connect, and I found it very easy. With now I have hybrid, so I teach all day face-to-face and online at the same time all day long. And it's not that that's harder. I just find that having 99% of my stuff online, the materials, it makes it a lot easier to manage two platforms at the same time. Because I've got kids on here that I need to care about, and I've got kids over here that I need to care about. And every single one of them is going to take that same test that supposedly we're still doing the FSA. So having things that are all online, it's a PDF, it's a writable document, it's a Google Slides, it's a Google form. It really does make that managing two different platforms simultaneously a lot easier. It also made it easier on me if there was any involvement with cheating or, you know, things like that. I could easily download it, attach it as an email, send it to mom or dad. And I haven't had to do that a lot, but it does kind of, the documentation part is much quicker. And, you know, it's like kind of instantaneous because I can see what they're doing. And I'm essentially looking at 4 screens all day long because I have my Zoomers, and then I have my smartboard, and then I have my work computer, and then I have my spare computer that I just do light speed on to see what the kids are doing on their actual screens, that they're not like Googling and that kind of stuff. So, wonderful, go. So anyway, okay, I don't know where it is. We'll find it later. Sorry.
Okay, so so the digital is definitely, I know something that they liked. Yeah, that they liked, the committee liked about the digital features. But remember that there'll be there'll be that challenge. The reason why I brought it up is there'll be that challenge of the standards not aligning. They'll have the different numbers. So, a lot of training and a lot of resource support will have to be in play if we go ahead and adopt.
Which is less stressful for the teachers.
I'm sorry, Dr. Wilkerson.
Which option would be less stressful for the teachers? I hear what April said about the media specialists. What about the classroom teachers?
I think my daughter is a brand new teacher this year. So like what Bethany is talking about doing in grades 3 through 5, they'll have to hold back some of the current materials to help with certain standards. And we would have to do the same where we would, especially where a standard jumps or changes differently or falls off, we would have to make sure that we relied on our old materials to teach, say like that vocabulary standard where it's just roots, prefixes, and suffixes. So the new curriculum would only contain that, and we would have to supplement to make sure our students could do all of that vocabulary standard, because that's how they're going to be assessed.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that it gave me what I was looking for. I'm trying to look for the least harm for the students and the least stress, which is also harmful to the teachers, which is easier on them, because we all know how horribly stressed the teachers are right now with the pandemic. So it's going to add to their stress by getting the materials earlier, or will it reduce their stress?
I think it's almost a twofold question, Dr. Wilkerson, honestly, depending upon the type of teacher you are. So if I use myself, who is very concrete, sequential, and a little type A, those of you who know me on here, don't say anything on
Why we
that.
get along.
Right? I would want the year where I had those materials in my hand and could start trying them out in my classroom before my students are going to be on the new assessment, because I wanted all that time to learn those ins and those outs. So for teachers who are similar in nature to me, it's going to be easier and less stress to have them up front because I have a whole year to plan for it. For another teacher, though, who's still having to give the same assessment, it could be very challenging because we can't afford to keep 2 textbooks. So we would be taking away the resource that currently aligns to the same state assessment they have next year. And now I have to do a piecemeal piece of it. So it really depends. That's why we were bringing it to you to see where's your guys' input, because we can make a case for both sides of it. We really can. And our teachers that were involved in the committee both feel the same way too. Several of our teachers on the committee have been utilizing the online access and already playing because they want to know what's in there and get their hands on it, where some are like, oh my goodness, please don't give me one more thing because it could be the thing that breaks me. So it's that hard. Perfect world, if we could find a way to have it all, it would be great. That's where Lori's other idea of we could look at adopting a little bit earlier, not doing it right away and looking at it amid. So, but I know that's not a black and white answer. It really is gray. This year, it really is a gray area for what would be best for our teachers.
I just know that, like, I know the challenge. I was English and reading coordinator when it moved from Common Core to LAFS. And it was tough on the teachers until they learned the standards, because remember, they were brand new standards. And then it was about 7 months later, 6 or 7 months later, it was like, nope, it's not those numbers anymore. And now the standards were pretty much the same, but the numbers changed, and just changing the numbers caused a lot of grief for teachers because they have to post their standards on the board and this and that. And so until we could get the materials updated, they struggled some, and that's just numbers. So there is a concern that it will cause some angst for some teachers. And then other teachers were just like, they learned the numbering system pretty fast and they were good to go.
Well, and isn't another piece for the elementary level too, that they would be doing math and slash reading at the same time. I mean, that's.
Yeah, we're only talking 6 through 12 because they absolutely tried that the last time. And they could not do 2 implementations in 1 year. So they have to go ahead and make the adaptation for grades 3 through 5 and adopt. So there is no choice to be made there. It's 6 through 12 that we have some leeway to do it, and we just wondered what you thought about it.
Is there any kind of middle ground where you can get the teacher's copies, but you don't get the whole pile for the students?
No, they sell it as a package. The publishers like sell it as a package. And so they don't typically break it up. And if they do, it's not at usually a very good price. So they would do, we would have the teacher, student, and online licenses as a package. So if we purchased it and then didn't use it, we would waste a year of our money for the adoption.
For myself, when it comes to, I wouldn't mind, I'm kind of like Candace a little bit, where I would be quick to like learn the new system, and I would have, ways that I could figure out which correlates with what and what changed. But I also kind of have already had a glimpse of this as well. And being on the adoption committee and all of that, to me, it's like I've already been introduced to it. Girls. And I would be okay with it. I know, as I'm the reading department chair at my school, and I know that quite a few teachers would be not okay with it. They would rather a delay. But I think if we maybe did the option of doing this in April, that way we can kind of get the trainings underway, and that way it's not just, okay, here's some new stuff when it's, August, and we're not really 100% sure what August will look like, if it's going to be like this, or it's going to be this way, or up here, down there, I don't even know. So, but I mean, I just feel like maybe not throwing it at them in the beginning of the new school year and introducing it in April. That way they have April and then on and through the summer to get familiarized. And that might make it a little bit better for some, especially some of the teachers that are on my team that are veteran teachers, but they feel like they've just gotten grasp of these standards. And now all of a sudden it's like, poof, let's change it again. And, I don't want them to feel like we're just shaking things up because we feel like you're bored. So I feel like there's a way that we can get the feet wet, without feeling like they are being thrown to a whole new set of wolves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm curious, Christina, Pamela, Brian, do you guys have any thoughts about this at all, or do you need more time to think on it?
I personally, and I can only go off my opinion, I would say that it would be better to do it sooner than later. But that's just because I've already been the type to start digging into the new language arts one for 3rd grade. So, I mean, I think it should be sooner than later. But again, that's my opinion because that's the type of teacher that I am.
Pamela?
I agree. I think it should be. I agree with what April said. We got to take the media specialists into consideration with all this. I just, I know that a lot of teachers resent the fact that things thrown at them at the last minute. So I just think the more time, the better, in my opinion.
And Brian, did you have anything to add?
I would defer to the teachers in this, or I'll put the video on there. But yeah, I would defer to the teachers on this decision.
Okay, so my question then is, should we give you some time to play with the rating system, or do you think that it is pretty much consensus that you would suggest that we go ahead with the purchase to start at the beginning of next year? Because I heard some mixed where some thought delaying a little bit might be easier. So I just want to make sure that we know exactly. So if we purchase now, then we will have to marry the standards internally, because the books won't do that, and they will not have access to the current books that have the current standards, because we cannot afford to do a gap year and purchase new in the same year. If you wait, we would do the gap year, and then we would look at April going ahead with the training and the purchase of the new materials to implement the following year. So just want to make sure that if you don't want to do the rating, that maybe you type in the chat what your preference is. And Candace, on our timeline for purchasing, would they be able to have until next month to like fully, because I know we still have to go back to the other committees, or do you want them to decide tonight?
We can hold until next month if that's the preference. We do have the next step is the adopted materials will go up for public hearing on March 9th, and that's going to be the community's opportunity to come to the board meeting and have comment on it. From there, if there's no public hearing, we're going to begin our negotiations as a district because elementary needs to move forward. So since one of the pieces that we shared last time is the materials that we are recommending, each of the committees recommended McGraw-Hill. So we will try to negotiate as K-12. So in that negotiation process, it will determine if we are only looking to adopt K-5 this year and 6-12 the following. So a recommendation tonight from the committee would be very helpful as it provides us additional guidance as we begin negotiations with the company.
Laura, maybe you could do a little bit of a litmus test to Marissa to see where we are. Where are we as a group? Maybe
Okay.
So
barometer.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. Okay, so we're at 7:10 and we go to 7:30. So it looks like right now for our activity, we're just kind of typing what our preference is. I mean, I'm saying that April, you know, kind of what I stated before, because it would give teachers that chance to, you know, get their feet wet. And I just know, especially with this year alone, but just in general, it's very difficult as a teacher to have one more thing pop up like right in the beginning of the year. And I just, it's difficult because we're trying to do inner workings of getting our own classroom ready. And I know for me, it would be hard to adjust to something in the beginning of the year because I'm no longer just a teacher anymore. I am a teacher mom. I have a daughter that's starting school. So I have that brand new piece of the puzzle and I'm not the only one. So that's another thing. I would rather something, let's just have it now, or in this case in April. It kind of gives that heads up with
just to clarify, Marissa, that April would be April of next year.
Oh, next year? Okay, I'm thinking of this
Okay,
year.
so that Dr. Wilkerson, I'm sure that's what she understands, that we're not talking about we would either adopt they would have materials at the beginning of next year, or
Okay.
we would do a gap year and then we would look at purchasing April and the following year. So next year, toward the end of next year, to do all of our training and let them get used to it. So when you guys are saying April, you need to make sure that when I said April, that meant that we wouldn't start next year with the materials, just to make sure you're voting the way you want to. So I guess basically what we're asking you is like adopt for the beginning of next year, or wait till the following year, which means we would put the materials in place of April next year, which is kind of what we do now, is we give teachers access and we start our training. And we would do that this year too, is after FSA, well, sometime in there because it's late. But we would begin, just like Bethany is talking about, we would begin getting our best standards trained, because they would be making that transition and straddling both standards. And we would have to do that curriculum work, which is also why we need to know. So it's either adopt for next school year, which is 21-22, and you start with your materials at the beginning of the year, or you wait until 22 of April 22, to start your training to implement materials for 22-23. Clear as mud, right? So yes. Okay.
I still agree with that. Yeah.
For 22-23.
Yeah, I would still agree with that.
April.
Because I'm just afraid of, like, if you do it like in the beginning of this coming school year, that whole, if there's overlap or there is a teacher mistakenly does the wrong standards, kind of like what Dr. Wilkerson was saying, that there's bigger problems with that.
April, do you feel the same?
Yes, I'm grappling. I'm just looking through the document again.
Yeah, and if you look in the, Laura, if you look in the chat box, looks like most everybody has agreed with April 22-23.
Okay. All right, we really appreciate your input, and we'll keep you abreast of what the teacher committee, the textbook committee says as well. I know it's a tough decision because everybody always wants new materials. You don't get them very often. As a teacher, it's kind of like Christmas. And but at the same time, it's hard because you're straddling two sets of standards that don't have an equal match. So it's a tough decision. So we really, really, truly appreciate your input on it. So with that said, Marissa, do you want to lead them into what topics that they are interested in? We'll keep coming back to you with our timelines and updates about this and let you weigh in on how we're going to do that implementation. But you may want to move on to something different for the next meeting until we get more in place.
All right, so I've put our agenda back up. So it looks like we are at our action and next steps. So we've discussed what we believe would be best for our best standards, what we are doing for, oops. All right, so I would say that maybe for our next agenda or action or our next steps is what maybe could we do as a committee to contribute to making that transition, like ideas to come up with making that transition like either more convenient. I don't even want to say necessarily easier, but like more convenient, like for teachers or media specialists or just like school staff in general. Because I'm just thinking like, how when things did change over, from Common Core to LAFS, what we had now, and then how FCAT reigned for all these years, and then we had FSA. When I was a first year teacher, we had FCAT, and by my second year it was FSA. And so it's just, kind of weird that I grew up with something and then it just kind of disappeared out of the nowhere. So I'm just wondering like what else we could do as a committee in that moving over, and what we could do to help with staff, school staff or teachers, media specialists. And I'm just trying to think of what I would want from a committee if I wasn't here and I was just in the class as a teacher. I'm just trying to think of things that I would want from a committee like this.
Marissa, you're still talking about the best standards, so now you want to take that a little bit further, is what you're saying?
Maybe for next, for our next agenda, what could we do? To make that move over, ideas to help out schools or staff or something like that. That's what I'm trying to think of.
Well, I could give a more in-depth plan for how we're doing it for K-2, if that would help. And then we could talk through how that would be applicable for, 3 to 12. How we're doing those pieces with K-2 moving forward next year, and then 3 to 5, because we already have that pretty much, planned out. And then we could talk through how, what processes we wanted to move over to the other grade levels as well. Because right behind this is math. So as soon as we get through this textbook adoption and we implement these materials next year, the following year, everyone gets new math materials. And all the new math standards as well. So we'll be doing this whole, it would be great to get a process in place for everything, because we'll be doing this whole process again for math.
Bethany, you're talking about, sharing here's the draft for the onboarding, the professional development, get some input from this group, how that looks, and any suggestions. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get at. The magic word I was looking for was onboarding, and I couldn't think of it.
Teamwork, Marissa, teamwork.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, that will be a huge help, because the state is hinting that science and social studies is going to go through a similar change in standards. So having a clear process would be great.
You want to get a kind of, Marissa, maybe a feel from this group if that's something they would like?
All right, so those of you that would like this to be part of our action and next steps for the next time we meet, which is March 29th. Motion to approve this so that we can go ahead with this. We'll talk about the plan, the onboarding, the training that is going to be done in grades, the earlier grades now, and how this can be transferred over for our older grades. So our, 6 through 12 and the other grades that are coming up for it. Anyone oppose? I don't see anyone. Anyone who is for it, just go ahead and give a thumbs up. This is good. We'll do this. Oh, I see 3 in the chat. Sorry, I'm usually really good about this chat thing. There we go. Okay, I see approve. Okay. All right, I don't see any opposed of this. Okay. Any other good of the order? Anything else that we might need to mention?
No, I just want to say thank you for everybody for their input. This is a heavy lift, and I know that the team is always looking for the teacher point of view and a community point of view. So thank you very much for giving us that data point that we'll take back to that teacher.
Okay. So if there isn't any other good of the order, any other comments, I will have a motion to adjourn our meeting. Looking for a motion. We've got one, I think of this one. Okay. So we have one approval. Was there someone else that said that they approved? I have Ms. Barroso with the second.
What do you need, Marissa? Do you need approve? I'll
I
approve.
see one more.
I'll approve.
Okay, that was all I needed. Okay. All right, so we are good to go. Meeting is adjourned, and we will meet back on March 29th, and that will be after spring break. So yes, we've got that fun thing coming up. All right.